All right, Ronan MMA, welcome back to the channel. The guy who can't stop snitching, okay, the world's greatest snitch, Ali Abdelaziz, has had some DMs of his that are allegedly between him and a Russian boxing promoter leaked. And these text messages are in regards to Francis Ngannou's demand for his first professional, or I don't know if he's had a pro boxing fight before this, but his first real, professional boxing match. And I want to talk a little bit about this and what I think about Francis Ngannou asking for what he's asking for, and Ali Abdelaziz possibly being like the worst manager in the world in these last couple of weeks. But before I do, please like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. I'm going to thank you in advance because I'm Canadian, so thank you very much for your subscription. It means a lot to me. And don't be the kind of guy that doesn't do the thing that he's already been thanked for. Especially not when y'all probably got some subscription out there, whether it's to Amazon or, Netflix or whatever, that charges you monthly for a handful of shows that you may watch, where my channel has, 80 videos and counting, and it's free. Just one click of the button. So thank you very much. And let's get into it. So Ali Abdelaziz has some DMs leaked, I think, text messages, whatever, on WhatsApp with allegedly a boxing promoter who was in talks to sign Francis Ngannou to a contract for a boxing match where he offered him $3 million. Okay. Keep that in mind. Put a pin in that number. And Ali Abdelaziz mentions in those messages, hey, I'm not his manager, I am his friend, and he wants $30 million. I did a video when Francis Ngannou, actually I did a couple videos when Francis Ngannou left the UFC that were not well received even a little bit. I didn't have even half the amount of subscribers I have now, and it did not get a whole lot of views. And if you're somebody who is already angered by the thumbnail, I don't know that you should go watch them. I went a little hard on Francis because I think that, kind of what I said would happen is happening. And I also said at the end of my videos, and I think I may have even prefaced with this, that I did not want Francis Ngannou to get screwed. I wanted him to be able to make his money and get what he thinks that he's worth. And, I thought that it would work out, or I hoped that it would work out well for him, but I didn't think that it would. I think that a lot of the more anti-UFC journalists and media members are partially to blame here as well. And I don't even need to name names. We know who they are. The guys who constantly will go out of their way to shit on the UFC and their business practices and all this stuff. But I want to start with when Ngannou left the UFC and his reasons as to why he left the UFC. Because if these demands of his are legitimately what he wants, then almost everything he told us is not true. Whether or not you want to call it a lie or miscommunications or just, I don't know, ignorance, or I have no idea. But Francis Ngannou was offered $8 million to fight Jon Jones. Okay. Now, I said in my video at the time, and I will say it again, I would fight Jon. You could knock a zero off of that. I would be severely undersized and way, 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 way severely underskilled. And I would go fight Jon Jones for, like I said, knock a zero off it, dude. I'll do it for $800K. I don't care. I would go get fucked up. It would take a couple minutes and I'd make a huge payday. Okay. Now, I know that I also want to say I do think that UFC fighters should be paid more. Not necessarily every single UFC fighter, but I definitely think that guys who are at the, top of the bill, the main events, all that stuff, should get paid more. And I don't know I don't know what else to say, really. It's, a lot of people think that if they talk about fighter pay and all they ever think about is like comparing the stars quote unquote, in MMA to the stars in boxing and how they get paid. But I think that if you were to look at like what it would actually look like if they were to raise the amount of revenue that went towards the fighters, it would much look like what happens when minimum wage gets raised. Okay, where you are still at the top of the bill, you are still the best of the best, and it doesn't really affect you more or affect you as much. Like I remember this happening when I worked as a CNC operator, which is not an easy job, and it's not something that the majority of people know how to do. It's, a computer numerical control machine that requires some programming skills and a lot of math and stuff like this. So, and I remember watching the very low skilled workers, and I mean no disrespect, but the low skilled workers at my workplace get raises, in when minimum wage would go up. But all that it really does is make their wage closer to mine. And I'm like, well, I know that the machine I'm running is a hell of a lot more profitable and valuable to this company than what those guys are doing. And so I don't think that it does what a lot of people thinks that it will do. I don't know. I jumbled my words there a little bit. Sorry. But yeah, I think that people overlook it a little bit and they oversimplify it to the point where they just say, oh, yeah, they should be paid more. Well, what I could see happening is like the lower guys all getting big bumps in pay, and then the guys at the top getting maybe a small increase in pay, but not what we expect. And comparing it to boxing, I don't even think is a legit comparison, because the guys at the top of the bill, maybe they're making a ton of money. The guys at the bottom are not. Like, they don't make a lot of money. Professional, unless you are a Tyson Fury, a Deontay Wilder, or somebody like that. Anthony Joshua, like Canelo, right? The names that we all know. Now, I'll be honest, I am not a massive like boxing fan. I mean, it's fun to watch and all that, but I think that MMA is a far superior sport, and I don't invest a lot of time into boxing. I don't ever watch like Jake Paul fights or anything like that, so it's not my cup of tea. But even like the Jake Paul fight, which Jake Paul is arguably right now like the biggest star in boxing, and if you are a boxing head and you think that that's incorrect, let me know in the comments. But Tyron Woodley made like what, $2 million for his rematch with him, which means he probably made less for the first fight, which means he's getting paid pretty well equivalent to what some UFC champions are getting paid. The ones that will at least sell some pay-per-views. But Francis Ngannou's demands when he left the UFC, he said that it wasn't about the money. And this is why I'm saying that what he said may have not been true. Whether or not it was a lie is not, something cannot be true and not be a lie. Intent is what determines whether or not something is a lie. Now, he said that the reason he wouldn't re-sign with the UFC is because they wouldn't meet his demands when it came to fighter healthcare and like a fighter advocate and all this stuff. And I'm really curious. I would love to ask him if he thought that Dana White was like the only ruthless businessman in the combat sports game. Because if he thought that, I feel sorry for him, because that is obviously not the case. Obviously. And I would argue that some boxing promoters out there are probably more predatory than Dana White when it comes to contract negotiations and things like this. Now, I remember when John Jones was going through his disputes, and he was saying he wanted boxing money too. And I feel like media members seriously overstate that whole boxing pay stuff, right? So I know Anthony Joshua's had I think it was like a $60 million payday or something like that, because they went and fought in like Saudi Arabia or wherever it was, somewhere in the UAE. But when you look at guys that are making, let's just use the number that Francis wants, $30 million, right? I went and looked up the fight purses for Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder. Now, a lot of people will argue that if I throw a number out there, that while the commission does not disclose their total earnings, and that may be true, but if that is true, You then have to apply that exact same thing for UFC fighters, which means that UFC fighters are actually making more money than you think they are, which means you shouldn't be solely shitting on Dana White because they're actually making more than you thought they were, which means their pay is not as bad as you thought it was. Okay. But let's just go off of the numbers that they supply us, just for argument's sake. Deontay Wilder reportedly, it was reported, okay? I looked for a number of different places, so if I'm wrong here, somebody let me know and provide a link or a source that I can go look it up at. Deontay Wilder, I think, made around $25 million, or at least that was the most common number that I could find for his rematch and I believe the trilogy with Tyson Fury. Now, that's a good chunk of money, okay? Obviously. It is less than what Francis Ngannou is asking for. And that is from a guy, that is being paid to a guy who has a credentialed boxing record, who is a well-known name in boxing, who had 40 fucking knockouts with 41 wins or whatever it was. Also with a strong A side in Tyson Fury, who can sell pay-per-views as well. And I believe, and again, same with the pay. I looked at a number of different websites. I don't know whether or not this number is correct, but it was the number that I consistently found. That their rematch and their trilogy sold around 800 to 850,000 pay-per-view buys. Now, if that is the case, right, I would say that those are good paydays. Those are fine paydays. What I would say, though, is that Francis Ngannou does not sell anywhere close to that. Like a third of that, if we're actually being accurate, because UFC 270 did anywhere between like 200,000 and 300,000 pay-per-view buys. And I know that a lot of people will get upset when you like talk about pay-per-view stars because they say, well, you can't compare everybody to Conor. Okay, well, I don't need to. I'll compare Francis Ngannou to Dustin Poirier fighting Charles Oliveira, which did over 500,000, which was the UFC's biggest pay-per-view in 2022, I think, maybe 2021, but 2022. Regardless, okay. Francis Ngannou, while is very well known to MMA fans, obviously, is not what you would call a pay-per-view star. And I'm not trying to shit on the guy, dude. I had a lot of people upset with me the last time I gave this take, but he's not. That UFC 270 card did not just feature him and Cyril Gane. It also featured Brandon Moreno and Davidson Figueiredo in the trilogy match, which you can argue that those guys didn't sell a whole lot of pay-per-views, and I would say, okay, I believe you. But I would also say that it wasn't zero, right? So if we're going off of, let's pick a even number. I've seen some websites say 300, some say 2. Let's go with 250. Let's say that they didn't sell the majority of the pay-per-views. Let's say that they sold a portion, like maybe 25%, because Brandon Moreno's got a lot of support behind him in Mexico. Davidson Figueiredo's got a lot of support behind him in Brazil. So let's just knock 50K off there. You're looking at, again, we're back at 200,000 buys. Those kind of pay-per-views literally lose the UFC money. Like when they have pay-per-views like that all year, they are banking on a Conor pay-per-view to kind of come and average things out. We didn't have a Conor pay-per-view in 2022, so it didn't get averaged out, but that was one of their lowest selling pay-per-views for that year. And that's featuring the heavyweight title and the flyweight title. Okay? And typically when the UFC is trying to help dudes, when it comes to pay-per-view stuff, they'll put title fights underneath them, right? Like people will say, oh, that card wasn't stacked, they're not helping him. Okay, well, Conor McGregor, and I know we can't compare them, but Conor and Cowboy sold, 1.3, 1.6, something around there, 1.3 maybe? With nothing else on it. Like, literally nothing. When they put title fights under Israel Adesanya's, they don't do great, but they do a hell of a lot better than that. objectively true that Francis Ngannou is not a pay-per-view draw. And you could say whatever you want, like in terms of reasons as to why that is, but he's not. And I don't know that Tyson Fury and Francis Ngannou or Deontay Wilder and Francis Ngannou would do anywhere near 850K buys, which is what allegedly reported Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury to have sold. So with the pay-per-view that reportedly sold 850,000 buys, okay, and also a pay-per-view that is more expensive than a UFC pay-per-view, with two boxing stars, two heavyweight stars in like the prime of their career, essentially, right? Everything kind of came together nicely with those two. Both credentialed boxing careers, right? Both, I believe, at least in one of the fights, I think it was two, were both belt holders or champions, right? Which boxing belts are kind of dumb to me, but it doesn't matter. They're both champions, allegedly. Then you would be, now compare that to a guy who defended his belt one time in the UFC, then left the UFC, then waited around for some insane number that he wants, where he loses his steam and his momentum behind the story of him leaving the UFC for a huge payday. A guy with no boxing credentials whatsoever against one of these gentlemen. Like, I don't understand. And to me, it's a little delusional. And I blame a lot of the media members because they play up this like, oh, he can go make 30, 40, 50 million dollars. No, he can't, though. He's not worth that much. And I'm not trying to be an asshole. I'm talking like from a business perspective. If it takes Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury being that big of a fight for them to get those kind of purses, why would Francis Ngannou get that in his first boxing match? Like, I can't fathom it in my brain why somebody would actually think that is doable. And you kind of see that because remember I said put a pin in that number. A boxing promoter from Russia. Now, mind you, it's not one of these big boxing promotions, right? Offers him $3 million to fight. Now, again, like I said, not a big boxing promotion, but also it's kind of setting the market in a way where it's like, yeah, the fact that he's offering him that much money would kind of tell me that promoter is kind of confident that he doesn't think Francis Ngannou is going to get a huge fucking payday somewhere else. And this bugs the shit out of me because I think that the media fucked Francis a little bit here. I think his management maybe fucked Francis a little bit here. But I also think that Francis fucked himself here because, bro, you could have made $8 million base, okay, before pay-per-view buys, between you and Jon Jones, which would have been objectively a bigger fight than Jon Jones and Cyril Gane, because whether or not you think Cyril Gane beat Francis Ngannou on paper is the winner and has the belt. So it would have been Jon Jones versus the reigning defending UFC heavyweight champion of the world, as opposed to a vacant belt between a guy who lost to the champion that left. And fuck, man. Like, Jon Jones versus Cormier did 850K. And if you're getting like $2 or $3 off every pay-per-view, you're adding at least a couple million to your $8 million payday. And then you've got guaranteed fights after that for millions and millions of dollars. He could have made so much money. And to me, it tells me that it kind of was about the money. It wasn't necessarily about fighter healthcare, a fighter advocate. And, as noble as all of that sounds, the fact that he's got a guy trying to get him $30 million doesn't really help his case. When it comes to his own words, that it's not about the money. And it's unfortunate, man, because we could be having, and while I'm excited for Cyril Gane versus Jon Jones, I would have been more excited for Francis Ngannou versus Jon Jones, like 100%. I would have been more excited for it. And it probably would not have been just one fight between them. We probably would have seen a rematch like somewhere, or, it's just so unfortunate, man. Like, Francis Ngannou, you could have made a ton of money And people, I had somebody say in the comments last time I talked about this, you better not say a boatload about 8 million when you're talking about 30 million. Okay, well, does 8 million seem like a boatload compared to 3? Because as of right now, that's the only offer he's gotten. And I will say this also. Ali Abdelaziz is a fucking snitch, and he keeps fucking over his own guys. And dude, you are not supposed to be in the spotlight. You are a manager. You are supposed to be behind the scenes. You should not be the ones making headlines. Okay? It doesn't benefit your fighters. However, maybe it does. Maybe there's a world where this is 4D chess and Ali is such a good manager that they put the $30 million offer out there, or, the fact that he wants $30 million to, I could see an argument for how it could damage his negotiating power, but that only works if he wanted more than that, which I don't know. I don't think he's that delusional. Now, if he's less delusional, then it would appear, and let's say he wants like 15, something like that. 30 million is a fine number to put out because you're kind of setting the bar. Like, this is how much they know you want. So they've got to come with something that's relatively close, like not extremely far away. Like 3 million won't work if you're saying that you want 30. And if it does, then it just shows how desperate you are and that there is no offers on the table whatsoever. And it's very unfortunate because I was hoping that Francis would be able to get a payday. I didn't think it would work out. There is still time for it to work out. And again, maybe this was just a negotiating tactic where they figure if we put out a $30 million fee, someone will come back to us with something a little closer to what we actually want than $3 million, because he could have made 3 times that much in his John Jones fight with pay-per-view points included. And I said this in the videos that I made about it, first, is that it seems hypocritical to me that he would be upset that Dana won't do the fighter advocate stuff and the healthcare, but that, wants to go do business with like Eddie Hearn or some shit, bro. Like, guy, does Eddie Hearn offer his fighters healthcare? Like, I doubt it. Especially not the guys that actually like need the money. It's probably if there are benefits, it's to his big names, not his fucking small dudes making like 50K. Like, people, dude, I think that all fighters should make a lot of money, but I think that the UFC gets singled out pretty harshly, and I did a video on that too where I received a lot of criticism because I was saying how it's bullshit that Patricio Pitbull can make $150,000 for a fucking title defense, and then people are shitting on the UFC, and then everybody says, well, no, it's not about the number, it's about the revenue split. And then I was like, okay, well, I understand that argument as well, but also it's still criminal that a champion is making that much money. And then you see Josh Thompson comment on an MMA Junkie post with the disclosed fight purses for Fedor, making 150K for Fedor, dude. Josh Thompson goes, they only disclose a portion. They make way more than this, and that's before sponsors. So you're telling me that the UFC pays their fighters more and that the commissions just don't disclose the full amount? Like, thank you for fucking ruining your guys' own arguments. You can't use that argument and then tell me that the UFC is the UFC the only promotion where the full numbers get disclosed? Because then there's also people arguing that they're not even disclosed pays. It's all estimates. So, I really wish that Francis Ngannou would have just taken the contract with the UFC and not tried to be noble, whether or not those intentions were pure or not, or if it was his way of kind of, I don't know that Francis is thinking like this maliciously, but if he wanted to look good exiting the UFC, that would have been a really effective way to do it, right? Because he had a lot of guys talking about him in a very, very positive way. And it's unfortunate, man. We missed out on one of the biggest heavyweight fights that could have ever been in the UFC for him to allegedly want $30 million for a boxing fight. His first, dude, I don't know, man. It's a little delusional to me. It's a little delusional. Unless, like I said, it's a strategy. In which case, fine. But, Ali, stop making headlines and try to stop snitching, dude, because it's getting fucking brutal. But, yeah, those are my thoughts on it. Let me know in the comments. I hope you guys make it through at least a bit of this video before you go and dislike it immediately, because a lot of people jump to Francis's defense without even hearing any argument for the other side or anything like that. But like and subscribe if you haven't already, disliked and unsubscribed, and I will thank you in advance for doing so. So thank you very much, and I will see you at the next one. Bye-bye.